one. So welcome everyone. Again, I'm Steve Boyle. It's my wife Carrie. We co-founded 241 Sports when our now 23-year-old was 9, and she had tried out for the local travel soccer team. And we were somewhat excited to hear the coach say she's our number one prospect. And we thought, well, that's kind of weird because she's only 9, but it was still nice to hear as young parents. But after about 20 minutes of how she was going to fit in the Brazilian style of play that he developed, he thought, we said, well, listen, Kerry played lacrosse and field hockey in college, and Atlanta's showing some interest in lacrosse. Can you tell us what the conflict will be? And he went radio silent, said, hold on a sec, as if he was going to talk to the guy in the back of the car dealership, and 20 awkward seconds later came on and said, we're no longer interested in your daughter. So went from number one prospect to no longer interested simply because as a young child, she was showing interest in another sport besides soccer. So we took that moment of outrage and we decided to do something with it. We were both educators and coaches in the sport world. We came up with the tagline, life's too short for just one sport. And that was around 2007. And we now are running programs around the United States and have gotten recognized for our approach to sports sampling and physical literacy here in the U.S. Through the Aspen Institute and Project Play. So we're delighted to be having the opportunity to bring our model to Canada. So with that said, I got introduced to Jeff Lenahan, who will be our camp director at New West. And Kerry and I had a chance to get out there and visit with he and his colleague Glenn Mulcahy from For Love of the Game Project. And we've been working tirelessly on weekly calls to try to make this happen. So I'm going to let Jeff introduce himself for those of you who don't know him, let you know how he landed in New West, and then he can introduce the other coaches on the call that will be part of the program. So again, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. Jeff?
Thanks, Steve. Nice to see a few familiar faces with joining us. I know a bunch of you through soccer. So both my wife and I, Sandra, have been coaching with New West Soccer for a handful of years now with our 2 older kids. And we've got 2 other ones coming up the pipe right behind them. As Steve mentioned, met Steve, I guess I'll go back one step further. So Glenn and I met several years ago when I finished my master's. Glenn has been working tirelessly over the last 5 or 6 years, especially in trying to help reduce the atrophy and the major drop of numbers in sport, especially in the youth sports sector. And the key thing is fun. The kids aren't having fun. So we connected and trying to help him out. And one of my areas of passion is youth development through sport. And I thought, I can help you. Maybe I could run a camp. Maybe I could run a sports camp. And Glenn, I know this guy named Steve, and he runs camps out of the States. And so we kind of all got together and realized it was a great fit. And Steve mentioned, Steve and Kerry came out, looked around at some sites, met some of our potential coaches who are on the call with us today. And you realize, this has the makings of something that could be awesome for the community, for people of New West, and hopefully the greater Lower Mainland and Greater Vancouver. We're very excited to have the team that we have behind us. I'm more on the sport leadership side. The coaches we have are health educators, what is it? PHE, that's physical and health educators. I'm sure they'll correct me if that was wrong, that work in the school system and they can properly introduce themselves. But we all seem to have a very similar focus on what we want out of sport, out of movement, out of these types of camps. And it's all about fun and making sure kids are growing as individuals, as movers, and as human beings, because that's what we want out of this. So super pumped to be able to secure Queen's Park in New Westminster for this camp. If you're on this call, you probably know Queen's Park. It's got a ton of open space, which has been great considering our COVID-19 restrictions that are coming in place. So we've got several different fields that are at our disposal, and just got to now cross our fingers that the weather stays beautiful, because that space can be pretty incredible in the summer if you've ever been out there. So that's enough about me and my crazy family and my background. I'd like to pass it to our 3 kind of lead coaches that'll be on the ground for the day of, Jen, Chad, and Cav. Jen, if you can go first.
Actually, Jeff, Jeff,
Oh,
if you don't mind, we were going to just have Glenn do a quick intro as well.
I was going to do Glenn afterwards, but you know
No,
what?
that's
That
all
makes
right.
sense. Let's do Glenn first
My
because I mentioned
apologies.
him a few times. Go ahead, Glenn.
I don't mind being the afterthought, Jeff. That's okay.
You were on my list.
Yeah, no worries. Just basic introduction. When Jeff and I connected, it was a few years back. Both have same mindset in terms of bringing back the game to the kids. I've been fighting adamantly pre-COVID to do so because what I was seeing in the space, a lot of kids were quitting way too young or having a really short career. The statistics in the U.S. is 62% of kids are pulling out of sport with a 3-year career, so by age 11. And for me, that was just unheard of because I played almost everything under the sun, won provincials in 3 different sports, did a degree in kinesiology. I think everybody on this space has got a degree in phys ed or some facsimile thereof. And been a multi-sport advocate for years. And when Steve and I connected 2 years ago, I guess now, he told me about his camps and kind of planted the seed. And then Jeff goes, hey, I want to do this. And we're not going to reinvent the wheel because I know somebody that's become really, really good at it. 10 years is a lot of working out the bugs. So we're going to be following their programming and adhering to make sure that we do everything right going out of the gate. So that's kind of my 2 cents to start off, and then we can pipe in on the back end.
Thanks, Glenn. So now I'll change my agenda around. Jen, do you want a quick introduction of yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Otway. I am a high school physical and health educator as well as athletic director in the Lower Mainland. And so I spend all of my days teaching PE and then working in the extracurricular, more competitive side of athletics. So the combination of developing fundamental movement skills and then applying them to specific sport. I also played varsity field hockey at UBC while I was there. So that's been one of my sports that I've really enjoyed, as well as playing in the National Ringette League for a while. But my biggest motivation to get involved in this camp is I, as a youth and as a child growing up, did get to play tons of different sports. My sports had seasons. I could finish one, I could move on to the next. And in no way did I feel that didn't allow me to play at the elite and collegiate level. And I feel for our kids that they should be able to have that same opportunity to try many different things and to transfer those skills and enjoy and love playing, because there's that mental break of doing things differently and not only all one of the same thing. So when I heard about this, I said, sign me up. I'd love to get involved and work with the younger kids. So here I am.
Thanks, Jen. Chad, can you follow that up?
Chad, you're muted now.
Oh, Chad.
Chad, we're asking you to unmute there, bud. If you were telling jokes, you're going to need to repeat them.
Yeah, well, I thought I would try to block out the kids in the background. I'm Chad Otway, and following kind of up my wife there. And yeah, me too. I like just growing up, I played a ton of different sports, which kind of led me into physical education and education in general. And I've been a physical educator, a foods and nutrition teacher. I'm kind of a generalist teacher. Now I teach a lot of math and science in grade 8. I've kind of been trickling my way down from high school to middle school, and I've been doing leadership work in elementary schools. And I'm a big advocate for pushing physical literacy in our elementary schools. And that's kind of been much of my focus of late, especially within our school district here in New Westminster, because it's just a real passion, because I see kids that when they develop strong movement skills, their potential is limitless when it comes to whatever physical activity they want to pursue later in life. We kind of get caught up in, okay, what's the competitive sport going to be, but what's their life journey going to be like as a healthy adult? And kind of having that outlook has really kind of helped me get involved with this, and just seeing what 2-for-1 Sport is doing. I'm just excited to kind of be a part of this and see if we can kind of break some of the norms that are happening right now in sport.
Awesome. Thank you, Chad. And Cav, last but definitely not least.
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, everybody. My name is Cav Whiteley. My full first name is Kavanaugh, but that's a real mouthful for a Zoom call, so I shrink it down. I do that on the field as well, because kids can't seem to fathom that someone would have a first name, Kavanaugh. So without repeating the same thing as Jen and Chad, I grew up in a small town where the norm was a multi-sport model. Spent all my hours playing in the backyard, a million different sports and a million different varieties of those different sports. And that's where it kind of fueled my passion to start coaching at a really young age. I've been coaching the elite levels of baseball for the last 25 years, but did a lot of camps and clinics as a really young athlete, which I think helped hone my desire and my passion for skill development. But as you do when you coach, you move up in the ranks, and I've been kind of doing the elite level, provincial team, national team, collegiate levels of baseball for the last 15 years. Had the luck and honor to win a couple of national championships along the way, and I did my master's degree in coaching sciences and sports psychology. But now kind of seeing the full circle of things as my young twins are now 7 and getting back into the grassroots coaching models, I realized that the success at those elite levels, the athletes that I worked with that went on to play professionally weren't limited in their sport experiences. They didn't specialize early. They played hockey, they played baseball, they played volleyball, they played soccer, they played basketball. Those are the ones that even when they were struggling in their particular sport, were able to adjust and find a love and find a passion even when that success wasn't happening for them. And so what that kind of motivated me to do was to go back and say, hey, the sport-specific model doesn't work very well, because the athletes that were doing that, they were burning out, they were failing, and then not being able to recover, and they weren't bouncing into good life situations if they weren't succeeding in that one sport they had put everything into. And to me, that trickled all the way back to the grassroots stuff, where the sports specialization was hurting some of those athletes at a really young age. So I know that not only with my young ones at 7 years old, I want to expose them to as many movement skills as possible, as many sports as possible, and let the passion and fun for the game trickle back in, so that it doesn't, years down the road, affect what they choose in life and where they go, and their ability to want to continue to play sport for health and fitness, rather than just the success and reaching the pinnacle of what athletic performance might be. So that's my motivation to get back into the multi-sport model and work more at the grassroots level. So I'm excited to do that.
Thanks, Kev. And if people listening, Chad, Kev, Jen, and I now have connected for a while, and our kids play sports together. So all of our kids are kind of around the same 5-year window, 9 to, I think my twins are probably the youngest there. So between 2 and 9 years old, but we have a bunch of kids in that same range. So if you're here, you're probably connected with us somehow because of our kids' ages. So at this point, I've done a lot of event management and tournament management, and my passion is wanting to host this, but Steve is the expert. So I'd like to pass it back to Steve so he can give us, a rundown of what these camps look like and what parents can expect for their kids over the week of a camp at a 2-for-1 sports camp.
Sure. So listen, and thank you all for, you have no idea how heartwarming it is to hear other like-minded folks at the level of education you all have and your experiences to share what you did. So thrilled to have you all on board and to help spread the message. So thank you. In terms of programming, obviously pre-COVID, this conversation would be different in terms of what our delivery model would be. But because this is what we do, and as Glenn alluded to, we've learned, like we do in sport, through trial and error, right? In baseball, you have to strike out a lot of times to get a hit. And there's some things that you just figure out what works and what doesn't work. We've been on conversations at the national level in both Canada and here in the United States, trying to wait for proper guidance about what's going to happen at the grassroots level to mitigate risk as it relates to COVID. And because we have to consider all those pieces directly in line with trying to deliver our program with efficacy, because we don't want the first experience at a new location to be one where, well, it wasn't quite as fun as we thought it would be, or we don't feel like the kids got as much out of it. So we've been working really hard to make sure that doesn't happen, but really understand that we can't 100% guarantee that there won't be COVID contraction, in the same way that we couldn't say that about concussions, or we couldn't say that about a lot of things that we look to mitigate risk on. But what we can do is promise you, we have our own children invested, we have our own lives invested, and many of us are going home to aging grandparents and community members who were invested in their safety as well. And the idea of mitigating risk, and this is something we'll be teaching the kids, is to make sure you're being a good teammate, because that's what good teammates do. And so we take a sport approach with everything we do. So as it relates to how camp will work, each of our locations will be slightly different, but we're taking a very global view in terms of how we're managing COVID. So what we are doing based on current recommendations, in the States we call it the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and then we work locally with state offices like here in Connecticut, the Office of Early Childhood, is we're going to put kids into cohorts of no more than 10 at a time, with at least one staff per child. We will have, per cohort, I apologize. So each cohort will have 10 and at least one staff person and support from our coaches who are here. And the staff are going to be high school to college age kids, as well as all the coaches that you see here. Upon arrival at camp, Jeff will be mailing out details in terms of how drop-off will happen and what we will do to make sure there's no commingling between the cohorts. Because if the first thing we do is upon arrival is that Johnny sees Susie from their third grade class and they go give each other a high five, well, then we've missed the whole point of the cohort. So we're gonna have to be really clear about, making sure we communicate to you what you then communicate to your children in terms of why we're doing the cohorts this way. Now we realize that, some of you have signed up because you knew Jeff's kids were going to be there, or Chad's kids, or whatever. And so we want to make sure we realize this is a social experience, that if children want to choose to be with a friend or two or a sibling, because their security is based on being in a cohort with an older or younger sibling, then we will certainly honor that. We'll have a system in place. It's just that we've got to be careful about over-promising, because if we get to a point where 13 kids want to be in the same cohort, we just can't do that. So we're going to have to figure out, that's why we're saying one or two, so we can guarantee your children a friend. The cohorts will then be, you'll get an announcement in terms of where your sort of home base is at Queen's Park. And so when you arrive, there'll be a check-in, you'll get escorted, your child will get escorted to where that cohort is going to sort of meet and take place. And we still, based on what facilities will be available to us, how many total children wind up enrolling, what any rotations will look like are going to be dependent on a whole bunch of factors that are still to come, as well as some anticipated regulations that may or may not lessen. So right now we're giving you the guidance based on what the current guidelines are, and that's the way we're programming. But we're still 6 or 7 weeks away. And think about how much has changed in the last 6 or 7 weeks as it relates to COVID. And, God willing, we'll be on the other side of this and continue to see a decline, and there'll be some restrictions lifted. I can tell you right now, we will not be requiring children to wear masks. That we will ask them, if they have them, to bring them with them, because it's again, we're trying to teach. And so part of what we're going to say to kids is, when you go indoors, if the protocol in your area is to have a mask on when you go indoors, they can do that, and whether that's to use the bathroom or emergency purposes because of weather, et cetera. Normally our camp would be that the kids going in from 3rd to 9th grade would choose their sports upon registration, and then we would build a master schedule that they would follow throughout the day. So if they chose soccer, baseball, and basketball, then they would find out that they have basketball first, soccer second, and baseball third. And that would be just the way you do a school schedule. That would be the order of their classes that day. This year, because of COVID and the no commingling, we're going to do it more in the version of what is our universal sport model. And that is, we kind of surprise the kids each day, right? So when we arrive, they'll probably know based on equipment, but not necessarily. So we might, do something like ultimate frisbee, but we're using a Nerf football as the frisbee, as the implement, right? We might do net sports, and those net sports might involve a paddle. It might just involve, a version of volleyball. We have such great staff here that, we're going to be able to be creative in terms of what those offerings are that each day, and that kids will get a chance to sample probably way more sports than they otherwise would have had we done our traditional model. I mean, we were going to do 2 sport choices plus everybody does universal anyway, Well, now it's pretty much going to be universal every day. Now, that said, there's going to be a lot of sports that they're familiar with, right? We are going to do soccer at some point. We are going to do, flag football at some point, things that they are familiar with. But we're also going to introduce them to varieties of games that are a little more sort of backyard style, because the sides will never be more than 5v5, right? And so it's going to be really small-sided play, which is great because kids get more touches that way. They can't hide, right? And so they're going to be way more involved than maybe they would if we were doing something that, even in our normal program, if we had 20 kids, we would break it into 3v3, 4v4, or 5v5. We rarely go bigger than 5v5 anyway, because our model is to help kids understand that equipment, space, and numbers of players should not be a deterrent for whether or not you can have fun and play in your neighborhood. And so we will teach kids how to be creative with the equipment and the space that they have. As far as lunch goes, we're considering, camp is going to be about 95% outdoors. We have some sheltered spaces we can go into in the event. We have to worry about thunder and lightning here all the time. If we were running a program in Seattle or LA, we'd have to worry about earthquakes and what would we do in the event of. There, I think it's just on a scale of 1 to 100, how bad is the rain that day? So we lived in Seattle for 5 years actually, so we know it fairly well. And so what we'll do is, as far as drop-off goes, we're still going to offer before and after care, so that if families are working and they want to be able to drop off, say it's as early as 7:30, there's an option on the website to be able to do that. Camp ends at 3 if you want your child to stay as late as 4:30. The only thing that'll be different during that is that normally who's ever in before or after care get to interact. If there's someone from another cohort, there just can't be commingling. So there's going to be some independent play. So it's going to be a little more babysitterish, if you will, than we normally would like it to be, because we like to continue the play. But it's really going to depend on who those children are who elect to do before or after care. Lunch, we're going to offer a couple of options. We're going to work on trying to contract with a local sandwich shop so that you could pre-order lunch for the week, and there'll be an opportunity to sort of pay for that through a form and a website. Or we'll have coolers available for your children to be able to bring their lunches, or if it's a coolant style lunchbox and it has a nice thing in there, they can keep it at their cohort spot. So all those sort of fine details, we're gonna send an email to you as camp gets closer, and it's a little more live for you at that point in terms of what do I need to know? What are the other things in terms of drop off and lunch and all that stuff? But we wanted to give you some sort of high level, what's it going to look like? What are we doing as far as COVID goes? And answer any questions that you have. Carrie or Jeff, is there anything I missed that either of you want to add in here?
I don't think so.
Okay. Just on my end, just so people know, we've been following closely the BCRPA, which is the BC Recreation and Parks Association, and WorkSafe BC are the two governing bodies right now that we've seen that are helping us create our safe work plan and how we're gonna be COVID compliant. So we will have a procedure in place that we will have on the table. If we'll probably actually distribute it electronically, because you don't want to touch the papers at the camp. But so that is priority for us, is to get that up, and we'll probably circulate to the city as well to get their eyes on it, because obviously, if you heard that the coaches we have, they're health educators. They're used to working with kids, and the care of the children is by far the number one priority. So, and as Steve mentioned, we'll have our own kids there. So we want them to be safe, just like we want ours to be safe just as much as we want yours to be safe. So.
Listen, if this was much larger group, we'd probably ask people to put questions into the chat box, but I think we're a small enough group where if you want to come off mute, ideally, if you're comfortable, come onto video as well so we can see you. If you have any questions, it's not required, of course, if you'd like to keep the video off. I know there's different reasons. Like I didn't shave today. I apologize for that, but Cav, I knew we could look more closely like each other. Honestly, if you have questions, it would be helpful for us actually to hear some things that you'd like clarified. And again, knowing that this is being recorded, that there might be some questions you have that other parents out there might have as well. But before we do that, I do want to just say, if you if you are committed to sending your child, we're going to need some help in getting the word out. As a new program, we've always depended on other families who believe in the philosophy. So if you need an email or a flyer or something put together that could be helpful to help spread the word besides what's on the website, by all means, please reach out to any of us, and we're happy to do that for you. But we're very grateful if you would consider helping other folks know, because we want to get to a critical mass, because if we can have a number of cohorts, it's going to make it more fun for the kids. So, so questions that folks might have, even from staff, if you guys, anything you wanted to add in that maybe we could have covered.
There's one that's come through the chat from Lisa. Hand washing and toilets.
So I'll take a stab at that. So back when we started this, we were going to partner with the city of New West. So I have a contact there that I've been going back and forth on. This question we've been discussing in the last week or so. At the very least, if you're familiar with Queen's Park, the arena washrooms are open. I think they're open daily anyways. I've asked what their cleaning schedule is. I assume, being a city, that they are fairly regimented with their cleaning at this point. There are washrooms inside the baseball diamond, and I've asked the question, but I haven't heard an answer yet if those will be open, and if they are open, who will be responsible to clean them. Hand washing, that's something we've discussed. I assume we'll get a giant sanitizing bottle, and the campers will be encouraged to wash their hands on a very regular basis. We'll also be sanitizing equipment as they change from cohort to cohort as needed. Again, these finer details we will hammer out, but they are high level. We've talked about them, and we know it is important.
Yeah, so some of our locations, the schools or the municipalities are actually providing porters to clean after every cohort use. Obviously, if the child has an emergency, then they have to clean after that use if we're really worried about the commingling of the cohort. So again, every municipality we deal with, though, is a little bit different. What I would say is, just like we're going to ask you to provide sunscreen for your children, bug spray if that's an issue, hand sanitizer is also a good idea, and put them in the habit of making sure, at our camp here in Connecticut, it gets so hot and the sun is so bad, but by law, we're not allowed to apply sunscreen, which you can understand for obvious reasons. So we coach up parents on how to coach up their young children on how to apply sunscreen and not miss stuff. So we can say, hey, it looks like you might have missed your cheek there, but we can't do it. So in the same way, we are going to model for the kids how to, when we hand sanitize, every time we touch equipment and we move to a new location, every time before we eat, every time after we eat. So, the best we can say is that it still is a public park. We want folks to be fully aware. We're being as transparent as possible, that we're going to work with the town, keep it as safe and clean as possible. But again, I think some teaching from home around hand sanitizer and healthy habits is going to be really appreciated as well.
Another question came in from Kimberly, just asking about sports specifics to your question, Kim. So she asked, will lacrosse or ball hockey be offered? So to the ball hockey question, our original arrangement with the city of New West was to have the arena. That has since been taken off the table. They are not currently booking that space out to external user groups. So right now we are looking at the Queen's Park, the turf, the baseball diamond, and then the grass fields, I guess, be south of the baseball diamond. So those are the three spots that we have to work with. Lacrosse has definitely been identified as one of the ones we want to do. I have a student from Douglas College, the BPEC program, the Bachelor of Physical Education and Coaching program, that has come on as part of her field work for her school. And she is a former lacrosse player with the Salmon Bellies, and she has just reached out to the president of the Salmon Bellies to see if they would be willing to partner with us and loan us equipment for this camp. We're doing the same thing with New West Soccer, with New West Baseball, football, a lot of those. This being our first year in New West, we don't have a ton of equipment, so we are going to be reliant on partnerships throughout the community to help us get the equipment.
Glenn, I think you talked about possibly floorball group coming in as well.
Yeah, I was kind of holding off on the COVID hiatus, but I ironically just reached out. So I know the president that runs BC, and it'd be great if we can get them to come out. But I'm not sure if they can do it on like the gravel and or turf.
Turf is pretty hard, so I didn't.
Turf. So it's just a matter of finding out on that query. Ball hockey, being a Hockey Canada guy and playing ball hockey my whole life, all we need to do is find a little bit of asphalt, and that can happen really. So I'm all over that. So
it's high level. I mean, we've got very creative people who have been around sport their whole life and grew up playing backyard sports with siblings and friends. So there's a lot of traditional sports you'll see, and a lot of fun ones that you may have grown up and forgot about that these people still live on a daily basis with their students. So
Basically, Glenn, Jeff just called us really old, I think is what he just said.
I was including myself in that.
yeah.
That's all good. Other questions, folks? These are great.
Actually, I just had a quick question about your first aid measures.
Mhm.
Like
So
how-
I am first aid certified. I've actually had to use it a few times. I've done a few taping classes as well, although I wouldn't expect I'd have to be taping kids at a camp like this. We will have a first aid kit and would have in our camp plan, we will identify obviously Royal Columbia and other close walk-ins, a dental clinic if we have to. And I believe as parents, you would have had, when you sign up, you will have to identify emergency contacts and the like.
Yeah,
I'm also a long tenured Hockey Canada HSB, 15 years. I've done a lot of first aid, industrial first aid, bronze medallion. So anything that comes up on that front, I can default as well. And
I realize that we've got physical health educators as part of our coaching staff who probably have to have it and use it on a regular basis. So,
exactly.
Jen,
It's
yeah?
the advantage of having teacher coaches on board.
Yeah, I'm fully certified. I was an athletic trainer for a while, and I have all my up-to-date first aid and AED certifications, as well as concussion protocols and concussion first aid as well. So I have all that up to date because I was a football coach for quite a few years, and that kind of is a part of the process dealing with that. So I'm pretty confident and comfortable. And a lot of times with younger children, it's about teaching them how to deal with discomfort sometimes, because pain is unnatural for them, and showing them that it's not necessarily life or death. It's kind of something that comes and goes and leaves, is something that needs to be learned as well, about how we kind of deal with some sort of discomfort, if it's a bruise or a fall, because it's amazing how many kids I know I've dealt with at high school that have never really experienced falling down before. And a phys ed class, and you see a kid that's fallen down or gets hit by a ball for the first time, and they almost go into shock, and it's kind of a scary thing.
Now, I think the trainer that we have at our camp, I think she's more of a social worker and a therapist than she actually is a trainer. It's a lot of arms around the shoulders and hang in there. And but no, obviously, Nicole, it's a perfect question, because obviously as a parent, you want to make sure that you've got the right people in place to do it. But it is one of the gifts of having teacher coaches involved, because we're all required to go through this on a regular basis.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I did, for sure. I would imagine they wouldn't have the training, but I know sometimes my kids, especially with this COVID, they're so apprehensive with the interaction now, because we're supposed to stay away. So, we're staying with friends, but if they get hurt, then how can you come near me? So I think just, and how you guys approach that too, like that's where I'm just thinking their minds might be as well, just kind of.
Yeah. No, look, for a lot of kids, there's going to be anxiety, and there's, most of my career I've been a counselor, quite frankly, and so I think us dipping our toe in the water is going to be a good transition for kids who have been away from peers and away from school, because once school comes, it's going to be like, holy cow, we went from like no contact to everybody's here. And so I think it'll be an opportunity to build some confidence for kids that might be a little hesitant around that. So at least we hope so. And we feel it even as coaches and staff, as we get to try some things out as well that are going to be part of the new normal.
And Nicole, because of COVID, our interactions with the children will be pretty much non-existent from a physical standpoint. If an emergency arises and that has to happen, we will have PPE on hand, masks, gloves. If we need to if we need to do mouth to mouth, then we'll have one of those. They have a two-way valve that reduces transmission back. But there's, I would assume the other parents / coaches on the line, we wouldn't hesitate to help a child if it got to that point. And we're also educated to know that doing CPR, chest compression, does help even without doing breathing. So we can have that conversation as a group, but there's no way we wouldn't do everything in our power to help a child, regardless of COVID. So there was another question that popped up. I think they did say they maybe were late and missed it, and I think Steve mentioned it, but if you could address it again, Steve, about do sports repeat through the week, or are they different every single day?
Yeah, so they'll be in cohorts, and the way we had a group, a call today with our staff for our camp that's going to have 180 kids under a very similar model. So there'll be 18 cohorts, and so they won't have the same sports every day, but we anticipate that cohorts, depending on their age and their interest level and who they are, might have some favorites. And so there's going to be a few opportunities throughout the day where the coaches of cohorts are going to sort of poll the group, what do you want to do? So there's a possibility that a group might just love flag football, and that's what they resort to when they do the polling amongst that cohorts, and another cohort might say, hey, we want to do this. But it's going to be more like our universal sports model, where each day the coaches and the staff are going to come with a plan for what sports they want to introduce that day. So we envision, probably because it's an outdoor model, probably more breaks than we would normally give, but probably a little, we call them transitions because it's from one sport to the next. It's just that normally transitions would happen, they'd be longer because you'd be going from one location of the camp to another. Normally we'd bring the whole camp back to a centralized location and say, okay, everybody go to sport 2, whatever that is for you. Well, now your transitions are going to happen with your cohort right there in most cases. It's not to say that someone who's on the turf isn't going to rotate perhaps to the baseball field, but it's going to just be a little bit different in terms of how we model. We talked about the fact that we still have to meet as a staff once we know the ages, the interest level, the spots at Queen's Park, what our total enrollment is. That's when we're going to put together our actual sports schedule internally, and then as much as we can share that out with you as families as camp gets closer. Good questions, though. Thank you all. Anything else that folks would like to have answered now, or you think we should cover, knowing that we're recording this? I realize it's a lot of content, and so we live in a space where we know it so well, so sometimes if we're not relaying it clearly enough, but hopefully we've given you enough to, one, have you trust that we're going to have your children's best interest in mind as it relates to risk mitigation and COVID-19, but two, we're really dedicated to our mission of getting kids to fall in love with developing their own physical literacy and creating a disposition to be active for life through sports. So that's what we hope to accomplish despite these challenging circumstances. All right, if there's no more questions, Jeff, I think we should go ahead and wrap it up. Anybody else, anything for the good of the order? Again, we will likely do one of these again, probably a month from now, in the beginning of July. You're welcome back on, and hopefully you'll bring 3, 4, 25 friends or something like that. That would be great. But stay safe until then, and if you have anything Carrie or I can do along the way, or obviously any of the coaches or staff on here, we're all available for questions.
Thank you very much all for joining us. Yeah. Very humbled to see the initial support for this camp. It's pretty amazing. And it's very humbling.
Thank you all.
Thank you.